Thanks for riding with us this morning. I hope you guys are listening to us on Patriot FB. That's Patriot F like Foxtrot, B like Bravo. Good friends of mine over there, and a great place for you to become a member. The Patriot FB website is very much like Facebook. And the idea is that you can be allied and friends and communicate with others who are of a similar mindset than you. There's no trolls on there. Their security is pretty high, so there's no trolls on there. There is, there is a group of people that are firmly in the same belief system that you are. Not that you should completely surround yourself with people like that all the time, because that's a defeatist position against critical thinking. I do believe that you should challenge yourself, as we did in the last segment, we're going to do in this segment. But there are times when you need to be able to sit down with other folks that have similar viewpoints, understandings, and appreciations of your positions that is critical to you. Now, there's a couple of radio programs that stream live on Patriot FB every morning, and I would encourage you to participate in there. I come on there at 8 o'clock, and I run until about 10. There's a podcast there that you can listen to. It's patriotfb.com/radio. And if you plug that in, it's like a podcast player that will pop up in your browser. You can listen to it all day. It's patriotfb.com/radio. Now, when you go to that link, and by the way, that works even if you're not a member of Patriot FB. But if you go in there and you register and you sign up and all that kind of thing, you'll make a bunch of friends. After I come on, or I go off the air at 10 o'clock, Resurrect the Republic comes on with Tom Lacavara. And that's a great program. Tom is also a radio host over at Republic Broadcasting. And then after his program, there's some music until about 2 in the afternoon, and then J.J. McCartney comes on. And J.J. is he's a great patriot guy, and he's got a good, solid religious and moral viewpoint that I think you'll enjoy. After that, from 4 to 9 o'clock is music, and then at 9 o'clock, Midnight Patriot comes on. Midnight Patriot is Jeff Norton's program, and kind of similar to what AVN does. We tackle different topics and subjects, and of course Jeff takes a different position and slant on things, but I think you'll enjoy an opportunity to listen to some great hosts who you don't see or hear on a national broadcast basis. We're the guys that are kind of sitting out there and saying, we're not completely happy with what we hear out of the Rush Limbaughs and the Glenn Becks and the Mark Levins of the world. And I have great respect for all three of those guys. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I believe that there is room for other, more conservative opinions than we hear espoused there. And, I call it the way I see it. Some people agree with me, some don't. I can't argue with their success. Those guys are very, very successful. But I got to tell you, I think there's a chunk of America that is hungry and thirsty for clear, unequivocating truth. Okay, so the topic here for this particular program was how the Ukraine and the issues in it and the rise of China as it's building up militarily and challenging the United States in the Pacific might actually be the saving grace of America. And if you recall in our last segment, and if you missed it, you can go back on YouTube and you can find it, or you can go back in the Spreaker application, the podcast, and you can catch it there. Originally, when we were talking about that last segment, it was how, under a critical thinking exercise, to place ourselves in a position of the Ukrainians and having a government that was not representing us, and we replaced that leadership, and how we can do that within the confines and the structures of our own constitution and our own moral and ethical standards and codes and religious and convictions and what have you. Now I'm going to take it and I'm going to turn it around a little bit. And I want you to take this opportunity to put a whole different viewpoint to it and think to yourself, okay, in this instance, how is it that all of the roiling that's going on globally with all these political governments and traditional enemies like Russia and China, and make no mistake about it, folks, they are enemies, and they have been all along. Anyone who labeled them anything other than that was just trying to mislead you. But how can we look at that and expect that that may actually be beneficial to America? And I'm not suggesting that it will be. I'm only pointing out that they're... Well, let me point it out first, and then you tell me whether or not you think I'm completely off the mark, or I've drunk my own Kool-Aid, or, I don't smoke pot, so you can't accuse me of that, but you get the idea. Our government, over the course of the past, decade, and more actually, but it, since 9/11, they've been at it in a whole new, with a whole new resurgence of effort, has been preparing and gearing up for a totalitarian, authoritarianistic system that most Americans don't even see coming. I think anyone who looks at the information that's out there objectively recognizes that we now live in a police state that is beginning to look more and more fascistic by the moment. And I don't mean by the day. I mean by the moment. Our government has been compiling and building resources by injecting men and training and material into our National Guards, our local community police forces, our sheriff's departments around the country, staging, if you will, that men and material concept to have access to caches of training, skills, weaponry, equipment in local communities, under the concept that as this thing comes apart, if it unravels, they have a built-in, small but localized security force that can engage their agenda. I think anyone who looks at what's happening in America today and doesn't see that to a certain extent, and I'm not saying you got to jump wholeheartedly into the conspiracy tunnel. I'm just telling you that if you look at that and you don't see that and you can't see any aspect of that, then I don't believe you're being objective, and I don't believe you're being intellectually honest. Our law enforcement in this nation has become epidemic in their and systemic in their abuse of the Bill of Rights privileges that belong to Americans. I point you to literally tens of thousands of examples that are out there on YouTube. I mean, we're talking about empirical video that shows police officers engaging in behavior that 20 years ago would never have been accepted, and is now routinely looked upon and said, oh, there's just another case. The courts are unwilling to do anything about it. The departments they work for have, for all intents and purposes, trained them and now condone the behavior and cover it up by saying, well, that officer was in fear of his life or in fear of... I mean, come on. A case the other day, they pulled an old guy over, told him to get out of the truck. The guy got out of the truck and reached over the back of the bed so that he could pick up his cane. And as soon as he appeared with the cane, the cop pulled his gun and said, I'm in fear of my life. Pow, pow, pow. Come on. I mean, if the guy's crippled up enough that he needs his cane to walk, maybe you ought to just hang on a moment. Really. The truth is, law enforcement in this country will tell us that law enforcement is a very dangerous job. And in certain aspects, I believe that it is. But the truth and the facts don't bear out the argument they're making. It is not as dangerous as they would like it to be, or like you to believe it is. The truth of the matter is, there are far more dangerous occupations that have absolutely nothing to do with law enforcement. And I'm not talking about military. I mean, I'm just talking about blue-collar stuff, you know? The reality is that they have convinced themselves that it's us versus them. And now they're living that. As our nation draws the resources, and I talk about resources being your income earning ability and any, money that you and money and values that you have. And I mean values as in monetary values. Forget your personal values. We're just talking here about the giant sucking sound that is happening across the nation of the resources of everyday Americans. In the lower middle, the middle, and the upper middle class. Okay? This is the complete and utter destruction of the middle class, so that what we end up with is one class, or caste as I like to call them, who is essentially the unwashed masses and the peasantry, and an upper echelon caste which is made up of two aspects. One, the ultra-rich, and two, the political class itself, who live amongst enormous privilege and enormous wealth. All of it leached off and siphoned off from the American population. Don't deny it's happening, because you can look around you and see it everywhere you go. We went from 17 million people on food stamps in 5 years to 50 million people. Ladies and gentlemen, a fourfold increase. From $17 to $80 billion a year. Don't try and tell me that there are not people who are really suffering in this country. That giant sponge sucking the blood, the lifeblood, the resources out of America is not really at work. But after all of this is said and done, how is it that activities in the Ukraine and Russia and China can actually benefit America? Well, I'm going to throw a unique and novel concept at you. One, it will take government's focus off of flailing us into submission because they've got to work against guys like Putin and that idiot over in North Korea and China. In other words, if government's attention is distracted away from the continuous beatings of us, at least we get some relief. Secondly, it allows Americans to continue to try to prepare for what I believe will be a significant deprivation of all of your basic fundamental Bill of Rights as we move forward down the road. Why do you need more time to prepare? Well, because for the same reason that this giant sucking sound is drawing the resources away from the country, that reduces the amount of resources that you have to prepare and store food and get yourself trained and physically prepared and have the capability and the wherewithal to sustain for you and your family. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I have no doubt in my mind that there will come a time in this nation where you will have to have the wherewithal to survive for at least a couple of months under a complete loss of control. And I'm talking about a loss of control that the government cannot contain, whether it's natural or it's man-made or a combination of the two, whether it's an economic implosion or the crash of the dollar or whatever, it makes no difference. The truth of the matter is that will happen here in the United States again. The question is, will you and your family be prepared for it? This gives you more time to do that. Third, as a result of what's happening over there in Ukraine right now, Russia's value of the ruble has fallen precipitously against the dollar. So the dollar is on the rise against the ruble. That's hurting Russia and helping the United States. So your dollar is worth somewhat more, not much more, but a little incrementally more. And so, and China and Russia from the perspective of what their currencies mean globally, remember that they're both members of the BRICS countries, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Australia, and Japan is talking about joining. They're trying to create an alternative currency that is a rival to the reserve dollar, the reserve currency of the world, which is the U.S. dollar. If they're successful in that, it will be the destruction of the U.S. dollar. If the ruble is falling in value, it doesn't have so much power to assist the other BRICS countries. China, while they're building up militarily and are placing themselves in a position of ever-increasing strident aggressiveness against the United States, is in a position where they're actually injuring their own currency. Why? Well, because when you attack the country that basically, for all intents and purposes, has a $300 billion bleeding valve straight into your mouth, you can't be the fat vampire forever if they shut off the flow. In other words, America loses $300 billion a year to China in trade deficit. As China's aggressiveness gets greater and greater and greater, you're going to see that number dwindle. To our benefit, their loss. In addition to that, China already has their own internal problems from their own upset and outraged civilians who are unhappy with totalitarian government in their own country and the oppression that goes on every day. How many of you heard about the terrible tragedy that occurred there the other day when 32 or 33 people or something were stabbed to death and over 100 wounded? And here we have these nincompoops in Washington trying to limit firearms, and you had 10 people get together as a collective terroristic group, and they went in there and they killed 32 people with knives while injuring over 100 others. Only 5 of them were killed and captured. The other 5 are still at large. You got to be kidding me. And you're worried about semi-automatic assault weapons? Hey, got to tell you, if I'm going to die at the hands of violence, I would much rather it be a bullet than a knife cut. Not for nothing. I mean, man, I tell you what, knife's a tough way to go. My point is this. If the United States is distracted from beating its own people to submission, and it's focused on these external threats of Russia and China, and in their effort to push back against the United States, Russia and China are essentially slowly but surely injuring their own positions, committing a slow suicide that benefits you and I. Gives us an opportunity to allow the pendulum, and if you recall in an earlier episode, I talked about how the pendulum has begun for the first time in decades now to swing the other way. And it allows a little bit more time for the pendulum to swing the other way. It allows Americans who are on the fence or unaware or are middle of the road and don't take a political stance one way or the other until the abuse is so egregious even they can't deny it, an opportunity to become awake and participate in their own destiny. You know, Pericles made the statement that just because you ignore politics doesn't mean politics is ignoring you. And, I mean, I can't advocate that be a philosophy that you live by strongly enough. You can sit there and say, I don't listen to politics, it just makes me mad. Well, the policies that these people who are putting together because you're not involved are actually what's making you mad. Different perspective, isn't it? What's really making you mad is not politics. It's the people in place who are putting the policies in motion that are injuring you. So refusing to participate in the political game, if you will, is refusing to solve a problem that, quite frankly, is affecting your destiny. Your ability to live and thrive, your ability to succeed, your ability to protect and defend and preserve and encourage and enrich your own life and your family. Hey, talk about a self-defeating principle, right? I mean, here you are saying, I don't want to get involved in politics because, I don't like it, and blah, 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 blah. They're all liars. Okay, well, you can continue to do that, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to continue to happen, and the more you ignore them, the more aggressive they get. And eventually, they're going to get around to you. As our republic descends further and further and further over the cliff of authoritarianism, we are not, as a collective group, prepared with a critical mass of Americans who are aware and awake enough for us to restore the nation. There's too many sitting out there who say, I don't pay any attention to politics. Or, I'm on the fence. I can't really decide whether. I don't know what to do. I'm only one person. Everything's going great. You hear all these different refrains. Yeah, something's wrong, but I can't quite figure it out. Have you looked? While Obama and the knuckle-dragging nincompoops in Washington, D.C. are scrambling around trying to figure out what to do about Putin and China and Russia, we get a breather. We get a little bit more time to plan and consolidate our forces and awaken and raise up those who are our allies and aren't yet aware of it. How can the Ukrainian situation help save America? How can the rise of China help save America? It buys us time. And it gives us an opportunity to use that information to help awaken those around us. What better opportunity than our last segment of critical thinking and an exercise on the Ukrainian issue than to couch that to someone who's on the fence and say, now, put yourself in this position. Do a little bit of thinking about it without the television on and your cell phone ringing and all the distractions going on in your world, and just think about this for a minute. How does it change things? How would we react? How can we? How should we react? Time is a precious thing. And in this instance, every patriot should be on board to do what they can and utilize that time as effectively as possible. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how all of this tumult and turmoil can benefit us. We're going to wrap for the day. Today is Tuesday. Appreciate you riding with us today. We'll be back tomorrow morning, bright and early. We'll try to keep you awake and aware about what's going on in the world. Tomorrow, there's another Obamacare delay. We're going to probably talk about that. There's stuff out there happening every day that, frankly, is like trying to drink out of a fire hose. It's hard for me to cover it all. But this is another abuse of the law by Obamacare doing another unilateral delay. So we've got to make sure that we're on top of that. Hey, we'll be back tomorrow morning. Have a great day. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I'm your host here daily.